Welcome to the Digital Amateur Television Experimenters Night. This is VK7OTC, the club station of the Radio and Electronics Association of Southern Tasmania. Amateur radio is a worldwide hobby that has many different aspects. Digital television is just one of the many modes and areas that are covered. Maybe you're interested in becoming involved in the DATV Experimenters Nights. You realise that you do not have to be a radio amateur or need any ATV equipment to participate anywhere in the world. Also participate in the night by coming up to the Queen's Domain club rooms. Yes, right on top of the Queen's Domain in the heritage-listed Coast Wireless Station. You never know, we might get you in front of the camera or behind doing one of the many roles during the night. We get underway with our program on a Wednesday night from 7:30pm local time. We'll see you soon. This is VK7 OTC.
Now we've got audio. I'll just do the introduction again. Sorry, Cedric.
That's all right, Justin.
This is VK7 OTC, the club station of the Radio and Electronics Association of Southern Tasmania, with our DATV Experimenters Nights. And our first monthly Working from the Shack series of interviews with notable amateurs. And our notable amateurs night is Cedric VK7CL. So good evening, Cedric.
Good evening, Justin.
No, take two. So I'll just remind people, DMR 3807 and also Repeater 2, and the YouTube chat channel is methods that you can ask questions of Cedric, and I think Cedric's happy to take questions on the way through. So.
As long as they're not too complicated.
Okay. Cool. So Cedric, I'm going to start off with who is your radio inspiration, your first radio inspiration?
My grandmother.
Oh, tell me more.
When I was a child, of about 8 or 9 I think it was, the year was 1948.
Oh, okay.
And Sir Donald Bradman had a team of cricketers in England.
He did?
And my grandmother was a cricket fanatic.
Okay.
And she said that we have to get a radio in this farmhouse because I want to listen to the cricket. On shortwave, of course,
okay. Yeah.
It was then.
And where was this farmhouse?
Judbury.
Judbury, okay, yes, okay.
I'm taking geography lessons after, if you don't know where that is. So, Grandma went off and she eventually got this, I think it was a Chrysler. It was a mantle radio of about yay by yay, and it had rounded corners. 4 knobs on the front, wave change, volume, tone and tuning.
Okay.
And it was fairly simple, but the good thing about it was that I was allowed to stay up until 2 o'clock and listen to the cricket with Grandma. And not only was she good at that sort of thing, and she was a good Methodist, well she was by the way, and no drinking of course except her homemade beer, and no card playing except the games of euchre and crib that she taught me to play.
Yeah, okay.
So she was a good sort. So that's when I first got interested in radio. I thought there's something interesting about this.
Fantastic.
There's no wires coming from England to Australia, and it's just absolutely astonishing. And
so that would have been the shortwave broadcast from the BBC?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I must admit that I've only ever heard it since at a dinner party one evening. There was an art teacher called Lindsay Broughton around the town. And one of Lindsay Broughton's party tricks was to actually give a pseudo broadcast. He turned the lights out. and the hisses and crackles would start up, and that was Lindsay, of course, with his sound out of here. We had a pencil with him, and batted it. Oh, it was just fascinating. It was so realistic. Anyway, that's just another little bite.
Okay.
Line.
Okay. I'm interested in VK7CL. Where did that come from?
Well, I went to high school at Hobart Technical High School, it was called then. It's now Newtown High School. And being a country lad, I had to stay at the boarding place, which was called Springvale Hostel. And it's just at the end of Midwood Street, just at the top of the grounds at the school itself.
Still there.
And I went there in 1952, the first year that school opened. Grade 7s, and then as each year went by, another year was added, and so forth and so on. The housemaster was one Merv VK7 Charlie Lima. And here my interest in radio perked up again, because Merv, he was also the captain in charge of the school cadets.
Okay.
And he used to go on these camps with cadets and so forth and so on. And a little bit of electronic and so on fiddling went on at these places. And we had a staircase in that place, and underneath the staircase was one of those funny triangular shaped cupboards.
Cupboards, yeah.
And underneath the staircase, in that cupboard, was a heap of army radio gear. And of course, boys being boys, we used to rat it a bit, just not too much, because if you ratted it too much, he'd wake up. And so I decided that I'd build myself a one-valve set out of something or other. I can't remember what it was now, and the antenna was a bed spring, up those coiled mattress things, the dreadful things. Stick a bit of wire on that and drop a wire out the window and hammer it into the ground. And one night old Killer came round, as his nickname was, and he said, "What are those headphones on there for, Lockley?" And I said, "Well, I'm listening to the ABC, as a matter of fact, sir." I said, "Give me a listen." So I gave him a listen. Oh, he said, "That's pretty good." He said, "Did you do that yourself?" And I said, "Yes, I did." He said, "Well done." He said, "Keep up the good work." And off he went. And I know damn well that he knew where that stuff came from. But he didn't care, because he was a bloody good educator. And if you did something good, that was it. No problem. Not a problem.
Yep. Okay.
So that's with the VK7s, and I thought that when I joined this club, I came back from Queensland where I got my licence originally, I saw Merv's name up on that board.
Yeah.
And as chair, I think secretary. I can't quite read it from here at the moment. The VK7 Charlie, I thought, well, that's my initials.
There you go.
I've got to have that call sign. And so I applied for the 2-letter call sign, and fortunately it was still available. So that's the story of the VK7CL.
Fantastic. That is a fantastic story. There's a bit of a technical theme coming out here around some of the things that you did at school. Did that continue?
Oh yes, yes it did indeed. I did woodwork, metalwork, welding, forging, tinsmithing, and so on and so forth. Not as much as a lot of the boys did, because those people with an interest in mathematics and languages, they didn't get as much technical training, which was a bit of a pity, because I think if you can use your hands, you can do almost anything. And I think that one of the reasons I went to that school instead of Hobart High School was that very reason.
Okay.
Because through the years, all of that served me very well indeed. I mean, I would not have been able to build a boat, a yacht, unless I had those skills that were given to me there, and in the hydro, I might add, which comes a bit later.
Okay. Okay. Fantastic. Fantastic. So the hydro is probably a good segue here. So you ended up serving with the hydro for a little while? So
too long, actually. Oh dear. Well, the short answer to that question is that I lost a Commonwealth scholarship at the University of Tasmania, that august institution.
Right.
And I had to go and tell Father about this down the country, and I've got to say he wasn't very impressed. In fact, he was reading the newspapers, I recall, at the time. And he didn't stop reading it while I explained what had happened. And then he said, "Is there anything else?" And I said, "Isn't that enough?" And he said, "I suppose you expect me to pay for the fees next year." I said, "I don't think that'll be possible, Dad." He said, "I don't either," he said. "Don't slam the door on your way out." Well, to an 18-year-old boy, or 17 or something like that, that was a bit of a blow. I went out, the first door was into the passage of this homestead, and it was fairly close to take it off its hinges. And the front door, the big front door, oh boy, that did make a bang. And down the path to the front gate, and I'm not too sure whether that came off its hinges or not, I didn't look. And I set off walking to Untitled. Well, trying to thumb a ride. I finally got a ride about, say, half a K over the Judbury Bridge towards Glenhuon. And that took me to Huonville, where I got out of that car, thumbed a right, got a ride to Hobart, and started life over again. And there. Next question, I think.
Okay.
Because there's a bit more to come in that, but it's not the right time.
No. Okay. So, you ended up with the hydro, or?
Yes, I got a job with the hydro as a Cadet Electrical Engineer.
Okay.
And that stint in motor workshops for a year, which was absolutely brilliant. Those skills of those guys was just had to sweat the blues.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, if you can imagine going out in the field with a 6-foot diameter penstock, a steel pipe, 6 foot diameter, and you had to weld sections together. And they were butted together and beveled edges, of course. And they had to be, of course, welded to X-ray standard. And Mario was one that I remember. Half the time in the workshop you see him lying on his back, making liquid metal run upwards. He was just brilliant.
Okay.
And there's about 3 or 4 Italian welders of the same skills. And it was just marvellous. And the machine shop,
yep.
There was a fellow there called Dick Leyland,
okay.
And he had a lathe which was almost as big as this room. Oh, just the mind boggled to see these guys work. And and then Walter. You've had a bloke called Richard Kleckerchuk up here before.
Yes.
Walter is his father.
Oh, okay.
Richard's father.
Okay.
And he ran a transformer workshop.
Okay.
And he's Polish. There were 8 employees in that workshop, apart from Walter, and they were each a different nationality.
Yeah, okay.
And he spoke each of their languages fluently.
Wow.
Including Blarty Australian, as he called it.
I love it.
Oh dear, there's a lovely fella. Anyway, and at Walter's tutelage, I built a welder in the transformer workshop.
Okay. Yeah.
And that served me well for, 50 years nearly.
Yeah.
Finally got too heavy to carry, so I gave it away. And bought a lightweight job. Next question.
No, well, it's interesting you talk about the workmanship that goes into that sort of thing, because the items that were being built in those workshops are still being used today.
Of course.
And still being maintained and still running as well as they did when they were probably installed.
Yes.
So that's just fantastic. Now I think you moved around a little bit in the hydro. You spent some time in the Moona workshops.
Yeah.
And then where did you go from there?
Drawing office.
Oh, okay. So
that
in
was
town.
Good. In Davis Street.
Yep.
That wasn't a bad job. I wasn't too bad at that.
Okay.
It was the technical drawing that you learn at high school. We did anyway.
Yeah. No, I did technical drawing.
So that served me in very good stead there. Mind you, it was wiring diagrams mainly.
Yep.
Yeah. But one still got used to what was going on.
Okay. And I think you went through a bit of a period of illness there, somewhere.
That was a bit later.
A bit later?
Yeah, went to the transmission line design office next, and that was absolutely brilliant.
Oh, okay.
Lovely approach to it. And that's where you learn about the catenary curve, which is what you get when you hang a chain between two fixed points.
Yep.
It's not quadratic. Don't get me. It looks a bit like a quadratic, but it's not.
Okay.
And the only way that the problem can be solved of how to set up a transmission line between towers is by iteration.
Okay.
So they had 2 cadets in that office,
Yep.
and guess what the cadets did for a fair bit of that time? They iterated on a hand facet calculator, which was brilliant in those times, because it saved doing all sorts of other oral things like logarithms and so forth and so on, which you really didn't want to know about, really. And yes, no, I did get ill. Oh dear. And the family doctor didn't know what the hell was wrong, so he sent me down to the Royal with my father. But they didn't know either. They decided the best thing to do was say that I had diphtheria and put me in the infectious diseases hospital up at Vaucluse, where at Gore Street now. So I went there, and the treatment was penicillin, that horrible white gooey stuff in a fairly large hypodermic, 4 times a day, 6 hourly, and in isolation, of course. So you had these ladies come along, the sisters, and they'd come along with the thing stuck up like that, and they'd bend over, tunk, and sometimes do it like hell. I've got their names. Sometimes it didn't hurt at all, and it was actually this lovely little thing. She had a different headgear to the rest of them. She was a staff nurse, and the reason she was a staff nurse was because you couldn't wear a sister's veil until you were 21, and she was only 19, but she's fully qualified otherwise. So after I'd had nothing to do for a fair while except give marks out of 10 for giving needles, I decided that because she was the absolute best at giving needles in the upper outer quadrant of the gluteus maximi, I would ask her out. And the rest, of course, is history, because there she sits.
Oh, very good. And for those watching, Janet's sitting here in the audience. So very good, and welcome, Janet. So what that illness actually left you with a bit of an ongoing problem.
Yes, it does. It did. It turned out not to be diphtheria, actually. It turned out to be infectious mononucleosis. If you get it badly, it's nearly as bad.
Okay.
And it's got the problem that it infects the heart muscles as well, called myocarditis.
Yep.
And eventually, towards a bit further on in my career, I became a teacher, and I was subject to a medical examination for the superannuation fund.
Yep.
And I've got this doctor's name too, actually. He said that, yes, he said, it says here on your sheet that you've had a heart, maybe had myocarditis, and mumble. He said, ECG. He said, the heart murmur's still there.
Yeah.
He said, no way, we can't have you in the super fund. Oh, okay, righto.
I don't think you get away with that these days, but anyway.
No, well, anyway, he made some sort of caustic remark which sort of intimated that I mightn't last all that long anyway.
And you're still here. I love it. I love it. So from the hydro, you sort of went back to your roots.
Yeah, I did. Well, you see, with that illness, I failed one subject at the electrical engineering diploma.
Okay.
And the rules of the aim were that if you failed one subject, your history, you don't get a pay rise.
Yeah, okay.
Well, yeah, £7.15 and threepence halfpenny it was,
Yep.
and it was going to go up to £8. And I thought, you miserable sods. So I suffered it for a while in the power and substation planning office, at the drafter's desk in the room. People come in and out all the time and all that sort of thing. And finally, about half a year, I decided to resign.
Okay.
And I went down to the farm and helped the old man build a system for apple picking and grading
Okay.
with a 3-point linkage forklift on the back of the Ferguson and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
And it turned that business round.
Yeah. So that was an orchard. The farm was an orchard. Yeah.
It wasn't. They came to tree pulling exercise some years later, and the old man pulled them all out and decided they'd rather feed beef.
Right. Okay.
Which was very fortunate for me and Janet.
Okay. Fantastic.
Well, we don't get to eat Murray Graham shower anymore.
Oh well. And where did you go then, Cedric? That was.
I ran a service station.
Okay. Tell me more.
Well, it was at the end of Manning Avenue and Sandyvale Road.
Oh, okay.
It was called the BP Riverview at the time. And the odd thing about that place was that corner block was owned by one Vern Reed, of even more notoriety than I am. In fact, considerably more. And during the war years, there was a multi-pump station, Mobil, Shell, BP, everybody had a pump.
Yeah, okay.
But BP weren't happy until they got sole rights.
Right.
So Vern had a document drafted, which was quite interesting in that they had to keep the place open. It was 20 years and they had to keep it open every weekday.
Yep.
And just generally do the right thing. And if nobody would sublease it, they had to employ someone to manage it.
Okay.
Well, of course, it didn't do very well. And poor old they were stuck with it. And they had an ad for a manager in the daily paper, and I went, answered the ad, invited for an interview, went to head office in Hobart, and by the time I got back to my boarding place in King Street, they were waiting for me to offer me the job because I start tomorrow.
Wow.
So I had to learn how to turn a petrol pump on, bowser on, but that was pretty good. But they're funny people, BP, I can tell you. But the funniest thing of all was Vern Reed.
Okay.
Because what he did, as soon as BP had signed this lease, he put a couple of flats up on top of the building. And BP found themselves paying the rates and everything for the lot. Well, they didn't like this very much, as I don't suppose anyone would, but they couldn't get out of it. And I got instructions when I first started. Would you be so kind, Mr. Lockley, as to be rude to every customer that comes into the service station? I said, I can't do that. That's not me. Why? Because when we leave, we don't want Vern Reed to get one customer. So, the state manager for BP lived up Manning Avenue. And he called in to get his couple of gallons of standard, no, super. It was a Humber Super Snort, a grey one. And he wore a hat, a proper ponce, and he wanted his 3 gallons or whatever it was. And then wanted me to check the oil. I said, well, this today I think you can get out and check the oil yourself. But the tyre pump's over there. He said, did I hear you right? I said, you did. He said, why did you do that? I said, well, I think that... He said, do you know who I am? I said, no. He said, I'm a state manager for BP. Oh, I said, well, it was one of your employees down here last week. I think his name was Palmer. And he told me to be rude to every customer that came in. I'm just starting. Well. It's a wonder I didn't get the bullet for that. Anyway, Vern came down this one particular day and he said, there's a Ford Falcon in the paper. He said, City Motors have got it. He said, now, Joe Green is the agent, like the salesman there. He said, I want you to get Joe Green down here with that car. He said, and see if you can get a trade-in price for my old FE on it. And I said, righto. So I rang this Mr. Green up and he duly came down and parked the car on the tarmac and Well, excuse me for a second, I've got to bring up the client. He said, who is it? I said, Vern Reed. So and I. He said, don't do this to me. So, Vern came down. He said, good day, Joe, how's things going? He said, Vern, I've booked this car for you to look at. He said, well, come on, Joe, let's get in it and go for a drive. He said, do I have to? I said, yes, you do, Joe. So, I went up the top of Red Chapel Avenue. And went 5 minutes away, only 5 minutes. Yeah. And when I came back, Vern got out of the car with a grin on his face saying, and Joe got out positively shaking. And Vern saying, and I'll give you 400 quid in my FE, is that a deal, Joe? He said, yes, Vern, anything you say. And I said, no, on. I said, what did you do to him? He said, oh, took her up the top of Red Chapel Avenue. He said, and flattened it on the way down. He said, I hope the brakes are good. Oh dear. Oh.
So,
next question.
At some point you moved back into a technical training sort of role after your experience in managing a service station.
Well, no, I didn't. I was the manager, the tea boy, the petrol pump jerker, you know, everything rolled into one. Accountant.
Yep.
Well, that's another thing.
Okay.
Well, no, I better not say this on TV. People might. they reckon this. They reckon the evaporation rate out of the fuel tanks couldn't explain the missing petrol.
Right.
And I sort of thought there was a little bit of a problem with the oil that was left in the oil bottles and so forth and so on. Anyway, Vern got to hear about this. So Vern came down and he spragged the local metropolitan supervisor. I think, no, it wasn't that. The local agent that used to go around the service stations.
Yep.
He dwelt on this bloke. And I went out to serve a customer, and when I came back in, Vern had this bloke up against the back wall, and he said, if I find out that you did anything to upset that bloke, he said, I will find you. He said, now go away.
Well, there you
so
go.
the man went away.
Okay.
Oh dear.
There was a bit of a foray, or somebody suggesting that you might try a different career path.
Yes, it was my friend Alan's mother.
Okay.
Yeah. Florence Mary Craig, she's a lovely woman. And she said, what are you going to do with yourself? And I said, I've got no idea, Mrs. Craig. And she said, well, haven't you got half a diploma of engineering? I said, yes. She said, there's mathematics in that, isn't there? I said, yes. She said, well, what is going to apply to become a teacher?
Okay.
So I did. And
what was the result?
The result of that, well, I got an interview a week later, and could I start teaching at Brooks High School in Launceston on February the 5th.
Right.
Which was about 4 or 5 weeks away.
Yeah, okay.
So, I thought, what about training? Oh, I haven't got time for that. You just got to go cold. I've got his name too.
So take us through the sort of the teaching side, the teaching history.
Yeah, 1 year at Brooks.
Okay.
Worst year I've spent in my life. It was terrible. That great amateur radio man VK7GW was a student there at the time, as I recall. But I didn't remember until he told me about that.
Okay.
With no training, you make all the mistakes in the world. And it wasn't long before a few classes ran absolutely right. And despite the fact that people tell you how to handle it, once a class has run right on you, that's the end of it. You can never get it back. You can never get control back. So the answer to that is, you start off as mean as you possibly can be. Because you can always ease up. And I found that out fairly quickly. And used it for the rest of my career.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic.
Oh, there's a few people up there that I remember with fondness. Old Frank Harris taught me to fly fish. He was a music teacher.
Yeah, okay. Wow.
Graham Hudson was a man for all season, with advice,
Yep.
as was Graham Foster. And one other. Who was there? Hank Askell, the science man, and Lyle Ewington, the maths man.
Yep.
They were all pretty good to me, and I think of them fondly.
Okay.
And they thought the best thing for me to do at the end of that year was to get out of there and go find a new pastures where the grass might be greener.
Okay.
And the new pastures were Cosgrove High School, was just out the road.
Mm-hmm.
And oh dear, the vice principal, God rest his soul, Ernie Norton, he said to me, what have you done before in your life? It says here that you haven't had any training. And I said, well, that's pretty true. I was only in the school of hard knocks. He said, what's... He said, I see on your past questionnaire that you filled out that you manage a service station. I said, yeah, that's right. He said, you've also applied to do a science degree part-time. I said, And he said, I do the timetable here, and I will make sure that you get all the non-teaching time you need to complete a part-time degree, provided you keep my Austin Freeway on the road. I've got to tell you, the Austin freeways are the biggest sod of a car God ever put petrol in. They are mongrel. Oh dear. But anyway.
Right. Now
we did that job.
Cool. I think there was something else that happened in 1963 as well.
I got married.
Yeah. So there you go.
Good. That was fairly important. Best thing I ever did.
It says right here, best thing I ever did in my whole life. So there you go. Good stuff. Oh, very good. So your science degree, you obviously continued with that.
Yeah.
And a bit of an interest in the earth sciences.
Earth sciences. Ah, yes. Mathematics, physics. I had a little bit of a, what can I call it? A little bit of a difference of opinion with a maths lecturer called Werner Grieve. A funny chap. Very Germanic. And he told me that as long as I'm on this earth, Mr. Lockley, you will not do maths 3. That's that. You are not a mathematician. And he failed me at half of maths 2, pure maths 2.
Okay.
But the other half of pure maths 2 was pure maths 2 engineering. The engineering students do it.
Yeah.
And the bloke who took that was a mate of mine in national service.
Okay.
Which was done previously, at the age of 18. Barry Jones, his name is. So I went to see Killer, who took the lectures in mathematics engineering, pure maths 2 engineering. And I said, Killer, can you give me a pass in pure maths 2 engineering? He said, of course I can. He said, you passed it.
Yep.
That's what's the problem? Oh, I said, there's none now. So I got a few points for that.
Fantastic.
And then I had to go and find another first year subject because I couldn't major in maths.
Yep.
So I picked geology. Woohoo! Oh dear. And I walked into this lecture theatre, the first of my geology lectures, and my world was turned upside down completely. But here was this man, a very, very intense looking man, quiet. And when everyone was settled, he said, I'm going to ask you to believe me if you can. But if you can't, You better have a very cogent reason as to why not. And at that point, the door opened, and in came this girl late. And this is where I learnt the benefit of the long silence. Prof Carey just looked at her. And she walked along in front of him, and his eyes followed her. And then she had to walk up an aisle, then she had to get along into a seat. And when she's finally got her books out and her papers settled and her pens out, he said to her, "Madam, will it be all right if I start again now?" Now, she was never late again. Anyway.
Not with Prof Carey.
Oh dear, wonderful man.
Very good.
Continental drift.
Beg pardon?
Continental drift is...
Yeah, well that's,
is-
yeah, I know that, but there's
Specialty.
a bit of argy-bargy about all that, but mind you, he probably got it half right. He forgot about the subduction on the other side. But on the other hand, you know, he could never make things fit, because he wanted them to. And there was one of his employees was a lady called Kelly Richardson, who was cartographer, etc., etc., etc. And one night at 3 o'clock in the morning, he said, "I have it." And his wife said, "What?" "I've got the solution to the problem." Oh, and it was the continental drift problem. So he said, if the Earth is expanding, he said, all this happened X zillion years ago, and we've got to put it on a smaller Earth. So we rang up Kathy Richardson at 3 o'clock in the morning, got it down there, and I started to construct a smaller Earth. Oh, dear, oh, dear.
I love it.
I look, honestly, he was a man and a half. And to answer your bit there, Rex, there was a symposium on continental drift in Sydney at one time.
Very famous one.
And no, an ANZUS conference it was. And this is when I was in third year geology and in tectonics. And he invited this lady from America to come and lecture his third year students because she took a diametrically opposite view to him. And would it be alright if his third year students listened, and would it be alright if all the staff listened? In other words, the lecture theatre was chock-a-block.
Oh.
And Tanya Atwater, this lady's name, Dr. Tanya Atwater. Pretty little thing she was. Anyway, she gave a lecture, and absolute silence. Well, you could hear the sound of writing going on. And the next lecture was on Wednesday. And there were a few questions asked of Dr. Atwater. And still more scribbling. And on Friday, there was the last lecture. And all hell broke loose. Because Dudley Parkinson, the geophysicist, is he, I think? Van Mort, the geochemist, and Ramsay Ford, the mineralogist, and Prof himself, of course, Michael Solomon, the economics geologist. They all had very difficult questions for her to answer. And what they finally proved was that about 50% of the references he gave were spurious. And at this stage, about halfway through, she burst into tears and fled. Oh dear, and Prof opined later that if you're going to attack someone, you need to know more about the stuff than they do.
Yep.
So,
It's good learning.
yes.
So now I think there might have been a few children come along about this time.
A few what?
Children?
Oh yes, 3.
Yes.
Well, no, we had to go into the manufacturing business for that.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. This is a G-rated program, so we'll leave it at that.
Oh, aren't we going to have biology?
No.
3 children. Richard's 54. Amelia's 51. And Lisa's 50.
Yeah. Okay. And
None of them are geologists.
You failed, Cedric. You failed. Oh, very good indeed. So this led you into a bit of a foray into opal work, I understand.
Oh yes, well because $1,760 for a scholarship to feed a wife and 3 kids and pay your rates and phone bills and all that sort of stuff, it's just not on. So a friend of mine had taken the old girls in a tour in first term holidays to Coober
Okay. Yeah.
or South Australia and Coober, and he brought me back a matchbox full of opal, rough opal.
Wow.
And I went down to the geology lab, and the bloke who does the thin slices down there explained how you do these things, and I built a cutting and polishing machine and took my first finished product into Rundle's, where there was an absolutely delightful lady called Trixie Kemp. And she said, "Where did you get this from?" I said, "Mrs. Kemp, it's hot off the press. I finished it about 2 hours ago."
Really?
She said, "Did you?" I said, "Yes." I said, "What's it worth?" She said, "About $150. I thought, here we go. And I spent a very pleasant year on repair opal jewellery, because she was a lady in Rundle's who specialised in opal jewellery.
Okay.
And if she had a job come in that needed a stone replacing, Cedric, can you come in and pick up a job?
You're the person.
Yeah, so that added a little bit to
Yeah. Okay.
It put bread and milk on the table.
Which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing.
Which is a very good thing. Okay. You make comment in here about one Dr. M.S. Gregory.
The examination. Yes, that's M.S. Gregory was he's in the engineering department, and engineering geology is split into 2 parts. There is that which is taught by the old prof, very interesting, got lots of tricks up his sleeve and in his ears. That's another story. At M.S. Gregory, he did the soil mechanics and rock mechanics, and that's a very, very interesting business, I think, anyway. Some people might not. Anyway, halfway through the course, he said, "I was prompted the other day to visit the library and check up on an exam paper that I set 7 years ago." "Oh, why would you do that, Doctor?" He said, "I just wanted to see how difficult it was." And he said, "And what you people better do," he said, "you better all go up to the library and you better all have a look at that paper."
Exam papers.
And why? Because he said, "One of you is not pulling his weight. And if this continues," he said, "I'll have to sit an exam at the end of the year." I hate setting exams even more than I hate marking them even more. So you get on up there. We went up, it was impossible. And we knew who the slacker was, so we said, "Down the road." So the next lecture came, only 5 of us instead of 6. "Oh," he said, "it looks like I don't have to sit that exam after all." Dear. And also, he had us read a piece called About Life and Living, written by Carl Terzaghi in 1923, who was the father of soil science and soil mechanics and rock mechanics. More soil, actually. And this About Life and Living is worth reading because it just lets you know that nothing has changed. He opined then that you had to earn to buy stuff. And what do we do? Earn to buy stuff. And nothing much has changed. But somewhere along the line in the paper, there's about 7 pages long, there is a classic remark which says, "Reason proceeds in a logical manner, and life is a paradox." And just think about America.
Well, truly, right at the moment, very relevant.
It's a paradox, all right.
Still very relevant. So now continue with teaching.
Yes.
Different school.
Different school. Oh,
Different
yes.
school.
Went over the river. to where we got a good view of the Western Shore. And Gilston Bay High School, it suffered the same fate, not quite the same fate as Judbury Primary School, which got bulldozed.
Yeah.
But a few years ago they decided that they had enough of Gilston Bay High School, so they threw everybody else out of it, teachers, students, the lot. Took down the sign that said Gilston Bay and put Lindisfarne North Primary School up there. What an absolute waste of a really brilliant asset. Oh, I can't get over that. That just annoys me to see. There's Rose Bay High School up there on the hill. There's a concrete jungle. They should have bulldozed that. Oh.
So what did you teach at Gilston Bay?
Mathematics mostly.
Okay.
I was, the first year I was just a teacher, the second year I was appointed as Senior Master of Mathematics.
Okay.
But there was a couple of little problems along the way. We didn't have a Senior Master of Science, so I got that as well. Didn't have a Senior Master of Computer Studies, so I got that as well. And they didn't have anyone in charge of the duty roster, so I got that as well.
Excellent.
And then I asked the boss for a key to the executive washroom. And he said, what for? And I said, so I could stick a broom up my back and sweep the floors at the same time. Dear, oh dear.
Oh, I love it. So this was your foray into computer science.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I still do it.
Okay.
50 years I've had it, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
1973 was the first class in computer studies.
Yeah. Okay.
There were only 3 schools in the state that had access to computer gear. One was Elizabeth College.
Yeah.
2 was Gilston Bay High School, and 3 was Cosgrove.
Okay.
And the project number for Elizabeth was 1, ours was 2, and Cosgrove's was 3.
Okay.
So I was 2,1, which meant that I was the chief honcho of Gilston Bay.
Okay.
And then everybody else, the also rans came in numerical order.
Mm.
And it was there that I actually taught a kid. Some of them were just brilliant. And this particular one, this is a couple of years later, Scott Brown from the Computer Centre rang me up and he said, Cedric, he said, there's a bit of a problem. He said, some little sod in your school has broken into the system. And I said, you know who it is? He said, yes, it's 2, whatever it was. So I went and looked it up, and sure enough, it was a bright kid. So I rang Scott back and I said, what am I going to do with him? He said, well, the first thing I'm going to do is to ban him. He said, if I were you, the second thing I'd do is to give him a credit in the school's board computer studies. Because he's a damn sight smarter than most of us are. Which I did. And at the same time, there was another young gentleman there who ended up, I understand, as the head honcho of Shell Computing in London, worldwide computing.
So back in 1973 and around that era, were they just terminals that went back to something at Hobart Computer Centre, were they?
Yeah. We had, would you believe we had modems, 300 board. Oh, Jesus, like the car.
Modems.
Oh. And a teletype machine. That was first. The next thing was an Anderson Digital Equipment video monitor. The next thing was a deck writer. And, oh dear, these days, they were black man's tools, they really were. But they served a purpose.
Oh, well, not sure.
And at one stage, to program, you had to use punch paper tape. Can you imagine? With 8 big punch paper tape.
Siemens 100 teleprinters. Have you seen that, Cedric? Siemens 100 teleprinters.
Was that a question?
Yeah. Siemens 100 teleprinters from Ken. You remember those? Teleprinters?
Oh, yes.
The Siemens.
That's one, we had one of those. Yeah.
Well, now, there was a bit of a jump here to something about building a yacht in the front yard.
Yeah.
At about the same this time.
Yeah.
So
the story, that's a very simple story. A friend of mine and I were in a place where we shouldn't have been, which is not an unusual circumstance. We were down at the Royal Yacht Club of Tasmania.
Okay.
And there was this bloody great Irishman there. I was a monster of a man. Bearded, balding, and a raspy voice. He came up to me and he said, "How are you, mate?" I said, "Good, how are you?" He said, "I'm suffering from a cascade throat." I said, "Oh, well, I better get you a beer." Oh, I said, "That would be good." So David and I bought this bloke his Cascade beer, and off he went, and he went back to his crew, or the crew, and shortly thereafter the skipper came along, one Dick Ellis, an unforgettable man. And he said, "Thanks for looking after Patrick." He said, "He gets a bit tiresome at times." And he said, "Would you like to come for a sail on Mercedes 3? Would I? What? That boat, it was just awesome. I went for a sail on it to Tribar and to do the Crayfish Derby on the way back to Sydney. We won the Crayfish Derby. We got stuffed full of crayfish that night, handful of beer, and I hitchhiked back to Hobart, I think, and Janet said, "Did you have a good time?" And I said, "Yeah, I did. Really good." And she said, "What are you going to do now?" I said, "I went and got a piece of wood, laid it on the front lawn." I said, "That's the start of a yacht." It took 4 years.
4?
4?
That's pretty fast for a yacht.
Oh, just as I had to go and teach at the same time, mate.
No, I said that's pretty fast. Most people I know to build a yacht in their front yard to work of a lifetime.
Anyhow, every year that crew of Mercedes 3 came back just to check up on the progress.
Okay.
And we had barbecues, didn't we, Janet? But one year we had, you can be caught. Next door in the dock to Mercedes 3 was a yacht called Sunbird 5, which is a Japanese yacht, and a Southern Cross Cup yacht. And there's this fella called Yoshi. Yoshi or Toshi, Janet? Yoshi. And the crew of Mercedes were looking after him because his mates always leave him behind, and so they took him under their wing. And they called in at the Granada to get some grog for the barbecue. And Yoshi said, "Lady?" And I said, "Yeah." So he went and got a bottle of that Portuguese, what is it? Rosé. Mateus Rosé.
Okay.
And he came up to our place and got inside and said, "For the lady," said to Janet. And then he went out the back to the barbecue, and poor old Yoshi sat with his back to the fence, and the crew of Mercedes were joshing him something terrible. And I felt a bit embarrassed about all this, but I thought, no man, that doesn't matter, he doesn't understand what's going on. He's having a good feed, he's having a few bangers and a bit of steak and whatever, having a drink. Well, I took them all back to their boats, and the next day I went down to Mercedes 3 about midday, and Dick said, "You might like to look at this, Cedric." And I said, "What?" And he said, "This flag. Sunbird had left at 5 o'clock in the morning, and tied to the forestay of Mercedes 3 was a pure silk Japanese flag, and written on it in immaculate English was, 'Many thanks to the crew of Mercedes 3, and to Cedric and his wife Janet, for an absolutely delightful time in Hobart. You are welcome at Tokyo Yacht Club any time you like to appear.
Well, there you go.
Signed, Yoshi." So,
Fantastic.
never assume anything.
No way in the world.
Yes.
Now there was a person called Peter Sulzberger at Gilston Bay.
Yes. Not the one that you know.
No.
Not the one I know. Nonsense.
Yeah.
Peter Sulzberger's nickname was Schickelgruber, which was Hitler's surname, original surname, wasn't it? I think
it might have been.
Anyway, Schickelgruber. He said to me this day, he said, "Are you busy in the weekend?" I said, "No, not particularly. Why?" Oh, he said, there's a navigation trial on at Barrow Yacht Club. He said, "There's a captain there looking for a navigator." I said, I can't navigate. Never done any navigation in my life. He said, well, you do sums, don't you? And I said, yes. He said, you do lots of? And gazettas? I said, yes. You can do all those, no problem. He said, well, that's all you've got to do. He said, you can draw, can't you? And I said, yes. Right, he said, you're going to come? I said, oh, all right. So away we went to do this trial, which is really like a car rally on water. And you have to, each leg, you have to solve a navigational problem to find out the location of the control, or where you think the control is. Because when you get there, you'll usually find there are three, one of which is the proper one and two which aren't. And if you happen to get the wrong one, bad business.
You end up going somewhere else.
No, well, no, you end up losing points.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
like 15.
Right. Okay.
Yes, anyway. At the end of the day, there were four of us. There was Terry Clark, who was the captain, owner. There was John Williamson, the gopher. And there was Reg, the statistician. Reg Watt was actually the Commonwealth Government statistician for Tasmania at the time.
Okay.
He could do things in his head that amaze you.
Okay.
So it was useful.
Cool.
And Terry, the captain, he was an amazing bloke, because if you solved the problem and set a solution up, he'd just look at it, and if it wasn't doable, he could recognise it straight away. And he said to John Williamson, take it back, tell him it's bloody wrong. Do it again. Now I reckon that 90% of the time he did that, he was right.
He was right.
Yeah. Didn't happen very often, but yeah. Anyway, we got pretty well with that.
No,
And,
fantastic. And I understand there was a bit of a wager on that particular...
No, not that one.
Not that one?
No.
No.
It was a few years later.
Oh,
We were very successful. And in 1978, I think it was,
Yep.
there were 13 trials on the river, and we won 12 of them. And the problem was that you had to set the one next year the same, which meant a lot of work. So Terry decided to retire the boat.
Yeah, okay.
But he said, what we're going to do is to put the crew on Alf Goff's boat.
Right.
Because every time we needed control boats, old Alf would be the first to put up his hand. And it's a beautiful boat. It's a Grand Banks 42. And so off we sailed to do this, the Royal Yacht Club trial, which is the epitome of them.
Yep.
And Ben Vaughan, another sailing friend of mine, and a wine man, by the way. We had a bottle of Range Hermitage, usually as a bet, just between ourselves, whoever did the better of the two of us. So this one ended up at Dover, and we won the trial for Alf. And up at the Dover pub, I said to Ben, have you got your bottle of Grange there, mate? He said, sure have. He said, did you bring yours? I said, no. Well, I knew I was going to win. He said, mongrel. Passed the bottle over in a brown paper bag. So we repaired back to the Honey Hush. And I said, what's in that bag? Oh, I said, it's just old wine. I said, He said, well, there's plenty of grog on the boat, you know that. If we've got wine, whiskey, you name it, it's there. So I said, well, I had a bet. I said, right, okay. Well, he was persistent. And the night wore on, we had a couple of Chivas Regals, as I recall.
Okay.
And Alf just got more and more inquisitive about this brown paper bag, and he said, can I have a look at it? And I said, well, not really. I said, it's personal. It was a bottle of Grange Hermitage, for Christ's sake, you know, worth a lot of money. And so finally I had to relent. I said, all right, Alf, here, have a look. Oh, he said, that's nice. That's lovely. And I said, what are you rubbing your hands together for? And he said, well, tomorrow at the Polo Bay Raft Up, you know, when the Royal Yacht Club gives us a keg to drink and we have a barbecue, he said, I think we might have a glass of wine. I said, and pray tell me, Alf, what are we going to have with this glass of wine? He said, why, Goff's national meat pies, of course, Cedric, what else? So we dispatched the block with Grange Hermitage with mean pies. But I will say, thanks Al for everything you did.
Yeah.
He was a good man, a really good man.
Oh, very good. Very good indeed. So this led into your forays into the Sydney Hobart.
Yes, it did.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a story around that.
A few stories there. There's one story where one of my colleagues rang me up one night at midnight and he said he inquired about my finances. I said, John, what for? He said, well, he said, there's a boat for sale. He said, I want to buy it. I haven't got enough in the till. I thought you might like to go halves. Okay, what's it called? He said, Chaos. I said, yeah, just what I want. Just what I really need, a boat called Chaos. And anyway, I said, I'll think about it. So I thought about it, and within a week, I became a fleet owner. Yes, well, 1.5 boats anyway. And the thought of a Sydney Hobart did occur to me, and I thought, yeah, this is doable, but there was a couple of problems because you can't just go and enter a boat in it because you need to have experience. You cannot skipper a boat in the Sydney Hobart unless you have had previous experience. And that means you've got a crew for somebody. So, and you need 2 people at least on your crew that have done Sydney Hobarts before. So I thought, I asked around and I found that John Bonetto, a sometime financier in the town, and a man with plenty of experience in Sydney Hobarts. As a matter of fact, at one time he held the record with 44. And he wanted a navigator for the Southern Cross Cup, which is a series of races run off Sydney Heads, 3 triangles, 180 mile up and down the coast of New South Wales and Sydney Hobart. Single points for the first 3, double points for the 180 miler and triple points for the Sydney Hobart. Yes, he said, I'll take you on. He said, but you have to sail for the spring part of the season all the time, every race. I said, okay, done. Well, I left the boat, cast to John, and he sailed that. I went off to JB. The first night was an overnight race around the Isle of Caves up into Frederick Henry Bay. Start line 7 o'clock, 7 p.m. Twilight, a bit, getting that way. And JB was wobbling along on port tack near a start line, which is really not a good idea, especially when someone's approaching you on starboard tack and has the right of way. So I said to JB, have you got this boat over here on starboard? He turned and he said, Mr. Navigator, what's your job on this ship? I said, I'm the navigator. He said, exactly, and I will conduct all my collisions on my own. Well, you might think that's funny, but later on it wasn't anywhere near as funny, I'll tell you. So then we got going. The race, the rest of the season down here had passed, it just passed. And we did the delivery trip to Sydney. And I don't know whether you people know it or not, but when you leave a landmass, it's a good idea to take a bearing on something so that you know exactly where you left from, because you might need to do dead reckoning navigation for quite a while. So anyway, we slept underneath Shooting Island, and the next morning, JB said, Mr. Navigator, you can have a few hours extra kip, I won't need you for a while. Oh, I said, thanks JB, that's wonderful. So I got up about 4 hours later and appeared on deck. Mr. Navigator, have you any idea where we are? I said, no, I just got up. He said, Mr. Navigator, that's not very good. He said, the navigator's job is to know where we are at all times. And if, Mr. Navigator, you can't attend to that job yourself, you leave explicit instructions on the chart table so that somebody else can do the observation for you. Now, he said, we left Cape Tourville right at so-and-so. I thank you very much, JB. It won't happen again. Then, cloud, you couldn't use a sextant for the rest of the trip to Sydney, actually. And up came the question again a couple of days later. Mr. Navigator, where are we, do you think? I said, oh, well, we're about 5 miles north of the entrance to Twofold Bay, which is into Eden.
Yeah.
He said, that's very good. That's excellent. I said, how do you know that? He said, oh, well, he said, about half an hour ago, he said there was a fishing boat past the stern of us headed due east. He said, that Eden on its stern. I said, oh, yeah, right, I caught again. But I was right. Then he said, when are we going to get to Montague Island? And I said, in about 2.5 hours' time, I guess. We'll be leaving that to port, we're starboard. I said, we'll be leaving it to port, provided you can keep the same course that we're on now. Well, that's very good. Okay. And then, the next bit of this trip isn't really very funny, actually, because John JB's wife came on the trip. And a southerly came up, a big one, and we were down to just a double reef mainsail, which is pocket handkerchief type stuff, you know. We got on this enormous wave, and it's just like a surfboard, except it was 42 feet long, and we just sailed down that wave at 18 knots. And Peter Keys was on the helm, said, hey, Cedric, you see that? Because I was up on deck with him. There was just 2 of us on deck. And I said, I did. And at that point, I made sure that my harness was hooked onto a strong point. I grabbed a bloody great Barlow 40 winch and said, don't look now, Peter, but there's a monster behind us who's just about to dump on us. And it did. And it turned the boat flat. No, not on its side. It turned, the mast was below the horizontal. But it didn't get wet because it was in the trough of the wave. And when we came up, or started to come up, the crest of the wave broke. About 200 tonnes of water swamped the boat. The washboards are in, so it didn't go below, down through the companionway. But there were 2 little, in the what is it called, the cockpit well, I suppose, there were 2 little ventilation windows which JB and his missus had opened. So his missus fell out of bed because she was on the top side. And then all this bloody water fell on her. And at this time she said, John, she said, I've hurt my arm and I'm wet, I'm so wet. Oh, darling, you said, don't worry about it, just pop into bed with me and everything will be all right. Life went on. Oh, dear.
I love it.
So, this, just as a matter of interest, how many Sydney to Hobart have you done?
7.
7. Okay. Over what sort of period of time? What are we talking?
1981, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was the manager of the Southern Cross Cup team in 87, which I didn't sail, I was just the manager of the team. And 1991 on a boat called Fascination, which Andrew wrote with the dentist owns, or he did. And in 1994, the Dad's Army trip.
Okay, tell me more.
The Dad's Army. Well, you have to pick your troop carefully if you're going to be a Dad's Army, so I did. Over myself. Graham Elphiston from Tribunna. Okay. He's a bit of a well-known character, is Graham. He can do almost anything, that man. Okay. He's brilliant. Myself, Graham. I might look at the notes there. Byron Nickel. A plumber. T.C. from the local pub. Never sailed on a yacht in his life.
Okay.
A painter. Chris Bird, an ex-student. Pretty good sailor, actually. A diesel fitter, Dean Bird, his brother. Also an ex-student. Graham, as I said. Beach ball. There was a town planner. a habit of standing in the hatchway. Now there are only 3 people allowed to stand in the hatchway. Owners, admirals and the other sort. Now Beast Bull was neither an owner nor an admiral. Byron Nichols, a refugee from TAFE, and Robbie Winterbottom, a young bloke, he wasn't Dad's army, he was a very capable forward hand actually. And we had some fun in that, and on one of those charts there somewhere,
Yep.
there's a spot which says
That's
the event.
that one there, go down the coast a little bit, and there's in pencil, that's it.
The event. And I think it's shite after it or something like that.
Yes, there's an X.
Well, that was a very interesting exercise. We're having a good run with the Spinnaker, and that's always very good fun. And, except that I'd replaced the Spinnaker sheets and braces with some stuff called Spectra, which is very, very strong rope, or line, or sheets, or whatever you like to call it. And it's so strong, it's stronger than steel, actually. And I'd always, on the tiller, had a very sharp knife strapped to the tiller, so if something nasty happened, you could get it and cut the rope, or cut the offending piece of line, rope, brace, sheet, or whatever it was. So the Spinnaker pole was held in at the mast that had a ball joint at the inboard end, and it fitted into a socket. And there were 2 of these sockets, so that if you had a bit of trouble and the wind was strong and you had to jibe the boat, you could actually set another Spinnaker pole up at the same time and then jibe the boat and then take the other Spinnaker pole away. That's the reason for having 2. And in this instance, the inboard end of the Spinnaker pole came adrift from the fitting. In other words, the fitting failed. And you couldn't foretell that. But then we were beating along. I don't know how fast we were going, but the Spinnaker was out there, and I said, the Spinnaker pole was dangling off the end of the Spinnaker, the clue of the Spinnaker, and the sheet was, the tack of the Spinnaker, and the clue is where the sheet runs back to, and I said, let go of the sheet so that the sail blows out vertically, we can pull the pole in and detach it and sort it out. However, when we let that sheet go, the end of it just went and knotted itself. It was the biggest figure of 8 knot I've ever seen. It looks more like a Turk's head. And it got to the turning block, and everything stopped. And there was the Spinnaker pole dangling in the water. There was the Spinnaker, half a mile away from the boat almost. It felt like that. And the next thing, gust of wind caught us. And over we went. And if anyone had been watching, they'd have sworn that we were prawn trawling.
With the Spinnaker.
With the Spinnaker, yeah. But TC, the plumber, he was on the windward side of the boat, because the boat went horizontal, the mast went horizontal, and did a bit of damage to the wing gear. The TC just looked over, so he said, "Is the keel still clean?" A little comedy moment, I thought.
Always a positive that can be drawn from those things. Now, I understand that there was one time when you were drafted into the Navy.
Oh yes. Oh, what an interesting trip that was.
Hey,
Here I am, trying to teach this class of kids, and the office lady came up and she said, "Cedric, there's a bloke in Sydney on the phone for you." And I said, "Oh, who?" "Lieutenant Commander so-and-so, I can't remember his name." I said, "I don't know any Lieutenant Commander so-and-sos." She said, "Well, he's insistent on speaking to you." And I said, "What about?" I said, "Look, can you just take the call? Just only a couple of minutes." So I went into the office, took the call, and he said, "We'd like you to navigate the Navy's yacht in the Sydney to Villa race." And I said, "Who's we?" He said, "The Navy, of course. We've chartered a yacht, and we need 2 watch leaders and we need a navigator. I said, okay. I said, how do I get the job? And he said, well, your name was mentioned. I said, thanks very much.
Mentioned in dispatches.
Who's paying? I said, oh, we are. Oh, I said, that makes it more interesting. And I said, there's one little problem. I said, according to the dates you've given me, there's a week of schoolwork in that, and then there's 2 weeks of holiday, which is doable. And I said, I think you better speak to my boss about this. And my boss at the time was a brilliant man, wonderful fellow. So he spoke to Bob. Bob called me down at the office later and he said, are you going to go? I said, well, I don't know if I'm allowed. He said, I've got a piece of paper here. You just sign this piece of paper. He said, if you don't take that, he said, you're missing out on the opportunity of a lifetime, I reckon. And I looked at the form and it was a sick leave form. I said, Bob, you can't do this. He said, Cedric, I run this school, not you. And he said, if anyone from the department comes looking for you, I'll have to do the right thing and give them the bit of paper. But if nobody comes looking for you, he said, I'll screw it up and put it in the bin. That's what happened. And I flew to Sydney and got put through the quartermaster store and got a pair of poncy white shoes, white socks, white officer shorts, and a beautiful Bond's navy blue t-shirt with a white engine on it, which of course is the navy flag, and underneath the words Buccaneer, and they're underneath my bucking hat, before you ask, Justin. The Buccaneers I'm talking about. Oh, okay. So, the skipper was an individual called Joel Mace, and this boat was, I think, 75 feet long. Went like an absolute shower. And on it was some navigation gear, of course. And I had my little bag.
Yes.
As you have to have your go bag. And up on the bookshelf above the navigator's table there was this set of 6 volumes of the marine site reduction tables. About that long they are. 25,000 pages, I think, something like that. Jeez. Anyway, and I suppose I hadn't been there for too long when he came down and he wanted me to take the sextant site. Which I said, okay. And I picked up the sextant box. I said, you can't use that sextant. And I said, why not? He said, that's mine. I said, oh, okay. Had the ship got a sextant? He said, no. I said, that's because I'll use mine. I'll sextant I don't have anymore, so I lent it to a friend of mine in Queensland because he's taking navigation classes. And it was a little half-size job, beautiful instrument. I said, I don't suppose I'm allowed to use those site reduction tables either. He said, no, of course not. I said, they're mine. And I pulled the bag out, and I got out that little black book. I said, I'll use mine, site reduction tables. He said, I can't stand you bloody city slickers coming on this boat, he said, trying to show all us old people up with that flash new gear. I said, as a matter of fact, these tables were published in 1943, mate, that's not new gear. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we did all that. We got this section shop done and dusted. And the next thing, 3 days into the race, there are 3 water tanks on this boat, 1 port, 1 starboard, and 1 in the centre. And he came to the crew and he mentioned that there's a problem with the water. Oh, what's the problem? He said, the port tank's leaking. He said, in fact, it's nearly all gone. So he said, the crew are left with the starboard tank. Now, that was 18 crew. He said, so that leads me to, the only thing I can do is to say that wrong water rations, 1 litre per man per day.
Jeez. Where were you saying? Tavila?
We're sailing to Villa, yes. We're 3 days in. It took 9 days and we were 3 days in. So I said, what about the centre tank? Is that leaking? He said, no. He said, that's mine. He said, I have to have my shower. So, oh dear. So we established
near that station.
we established a routine where we'd go and thieve his water. Oh dear. Oh, the rotten old sod. Oh dear. But it was a good trip. And I do remember in the middle of the night I got up one night to go out to the back and pump ship. And I clipped onto the backstay and I looked at the churning water. We were going about 14 knots, I suppose. And I thought to myself, what on earth, if you fell over here, you'd have no hope. You'd be a goner. And we had a trip to the beginnings of the satellite navigation, a old Magnavox, and it used to track satellites that were in continuous orbit around the Earth, and you have about 8 minutes to get a fix if you knew what time the satellite was coming. And there was one fix where it headed north, and Eromanga, I think was the name of the island or something like that. Anyway, this bloody satellite thing put us fair and square on top of the island. Not possible, because we were 5 miles to the east of it. So that sort of navigation really wasn't all that efficient. Yeah, so
And the unit, how big was the unit in the ship? Yeah. Okay. Large.
I didn't try to lift it.
No,
No, I wouldn't.
no. Okay.
Yeah, so we got to Villa and had a couple of days there and a nice trip back. And I got back on my wife's birthday.
There you go.
Courtesy of a nice Italian man. Because my aeroplane, I got to Sydney and the next plane wasn't going to go till the day after. But a nice Italian man in the booking office, I played on his romantic, background. Said, it really is important. Wife, birthday, I've really got to get home today. Oh, he said, all right. He's come this way. We'll get you another ticket. Oh, yeah.
Fantastic.
That was good.
Yeah, I think you spent a bit of time up in Townsville, which I think leads into a bit more of amateur radio.
Oh, yes, that's right. We've got a daughter who lives in Townsville, and we've got a son who lives in Brisbane. Our son is fluent in Japanese, and he worked in Japan for 12 years, something like that, Janet. And the pay for language teaching was pretty good. And if you took the students, private students, it was even better, actually.
Okay.
And Amelia thought that she'd like to have us go up this teaching business. She's actually a nurse. And she rang up her brother and asked if he could get her a job. Well, of course he could. He did. And off she went. And then a year after, her husband followed. But the proviso was that Janet and I had to cease work, pack up, go up to Townsville, live in the house, look after the swimming pool and the cats. Which was no hard task. So off we went. And we had a camper van, and I joined the local chapter of the CMCA. Went on these excursions that they have, and at Crystal Creek, just a bit north of Townsville, this particular day, I decided that I wanted the daily paper. So I went up to this chap called Wallaby Bob and asked if I could borrow his bike. He said, sure. What for? I said, I want to go and get the paper. He did get one for me too while he was there with it. I looked in the cabin of his bus, and there was this radio. I said, what's that? He said, that's an ICOM 706 Mark II-G. I said, oh. I said, what sort of radio is that? It's an amateur radio. I said, no. And I said, what's that VK4WJ? He said, my call sign. VK4 for Queensland, WJ for me. Oh, I said, that's interesting. I said, how do I get one of those licences? Oh, I said, you see that bloke over there? That was the man called the Master, VK4IGM. And I went to talk, and I then fronted up to the Amateur Radio Club in Townsville, took part in the lessons there that they have from time to time, and enrolled in Ron Bertram's school.
Yeah.
Did all the exams and became a radio amateur. And I came back here with the call sign up. It was VK4CSL, and I got VK7CSL, and then when two other call signs were allowed, got VK7 Charlie Lima. So yeah, I owe a bit to Wallaby Bob, lovely fella,
Fantastic.
and the Master, and Og. Og is the he's almost the head honcho of Townsville Club.
Yeah, okay.
He's the man who makes it work.
And are you still a member of TARC?
I am.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic.
I'm the southernmost member, I think.
There you go.
Whatever that means.
There you go. Well, that's fantastic, Cedric. I might open it up for any questions. Any questions? Any questions about the charts or the Go Kit, or we'll have a look at that in a minute.
Yeah, well, the charts, actually, there's a bit of a story about, you might notice the pencil work's a bit ordinary. It's a bit thickish. That's because you don't use a 6/8 pencil on paper that can get wet, damp.
No.
So you use about a 2B.
Okay.
And that's like using a piece of charcoal, I suppose. And you might notice that there's squares with dots in, triangles with dots in, and circles with dots in. Now, circles with dots in are an observed position.
Okay.
It's pretty close to the truth. A square is an estimated position.
Okay.
In other words, you've got no bloody idea. And the triangle with a dot in it is a dead reckoning position, where and that's another thing I must point out. Helmsmen are notorious fibbers. They've got the game down to that T. They're supposed to say every hour what course they've been doing and what speed they've been doing.
Yeah.
That's just so that the navigator can get a handle on things, you see. So, and the usual is that you can sail about at 30 degrees to the apparent wind. But a lot of helmsmen think they can do better than that, and they tell you so, but if you've been observing the helmsman, you know that he's telling lies and he's only getting 35 degrees, so you take the bit of paper that he's put 30 degrees on, you cross it out and put 35, and you've got 35. And they also tell tales about how fast they've gone too. So you knock a bit off of that too. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other art of navigation, because it is really an art, it is knowing exactly where you are not.
Yeah.
And by that I mean, I do not want to be on that rock. No way, no, Jose. I don't want to be on any rock, so I make sure that I'm nowhere near it. And so I know exactly where I'm not.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not on that rock. And there's another little Ute saying that I heard from Jim Hardy. He came down to the club in 1980 something to give the members' speech at the members' dinner, annual dinner. And it wasn't long after the 1979 Fastnet, at which he was on a boat called Impetuous. And they got a hell of a hide in that race. It was one of the worst ever. And Australia actually won the Admiral's Cup that year. Sid Fisher and Graham Lambert, and I can't think of the other one. Anyhow, someone in the audience asked Jim Hardy what are the essential ingredients of a race-winning performance, which was a fair question. He said, well, there are two. There are just two. He said, fact number one is that you have to keep the boat underneath the mast. He said, that is a necessary and sufficient condition. And the second one is, you must never, ever let the draft of the boat exceed the depth of the water. He said, that is the big no-no, that is a real big no-no. He said, and that, gentlemen, is the way that you get to finish a race.
Sweet and simple. I love it. Oh, very good. Any questions for Cedric?
Well, that must have been a good lesson.
I think you were very comprehensively, very comprehensive. Now we do have Tony Lathoris is on VKT, is on the chat channel, as well as Roger. Roger Nichols is.
Oh, Roger the Roger.
So Roger's there. And Hayden's there as well. So Hayden pointed out the audio issue we had earlier. So that's said it's much better. So that's good. So so there you go.
No questions from those gentlemen.
Well, what I'll actually do, I'll put the call out, and then we might put a call out on here, and see whether we get any questions. I'll put a call out on here.
Oh, we're going out on the air.
This is VK7 OTC, just putting a call out for any questions or comments for our DATV Experimenters Night and the interview with Cedric VK7CL. This is VK7 OTC listening. We now have multiple devices on multiple modes and multiple frequencies.
All kinds of technology.
This is VK7 OTC, just putting the call out for any questions or comments for our Working from the Shack interview tonight with Cedric VK7CL.
One on the chat.
Oh, hang on, one on the chat. Now, ask Cedric about Doug Ewington's influences.
Lyle Ewington, I think he means.
Okay.
And do we know who it was?
That was Roger.
Lyle Ewington was the senior master of mathematics at Brooks. I won't say what his nickname was. Nicknames are best left alone, I think, Roger. But he did have a great influence on me because I was sort of his protege, being mathematically minded, teaching mostly maths actually, and he was a very helpful man.
Okay.
In fact, he was so helpful I invited him to our wedding.
Oh, there you go.
An invitation which he accepted graciously.
Fantastic.
Yes. So there you are, Roger, that's the answer to that. I like the man.
There you go. Oh, very good. Very good indeed.
Oh, there's another one, was there?
Oh no, Doug Ewington, geology teacher, my mistake. So, okay, it was from Roger. So no problems at all. Yeah, VK7 Victor Hotel. Go ahead, Vince.
Thank you, Justin. Hello, Cedric, and hello to your wonderful wife, Janet. I've known you for a long time, and look, I've got to tell you, I can only say thank you for your wisdom. Over all the years that I've known you, your wisdom has been marvellous. But I've got to say, this is one of the best interviews I have ever listened to. It has been cracking fun. I have not laughed so much in a long time. Thank you, Cedric. Thank you, Justin.
Do you want to respond to him?
Thank you, Vince. The pleasure is mine, mate.
Oh, very good. So we might wrap. Cheers, Vince. This is VK7 OTC clear. We might wrap it up at that. I'll just do a quick reminder. I just remind people that It is the Remembrance Day contest next week. This weekend.
This weekend, Justin.
So 15th and 16th, I'll get it right this time because I scared everyone last time, thinking it was last weekend. And there was frequencies put out in the broadcast on Sunday. Suggested frequencies, and also if you're interested in being involved with the band dance, then have a chat with Murray and Richard, because we have a little bit of a spreadsheet going on.
A schedule.
A schedule. Yes, schedule. So that's certainly available. All the way from 160 metres through to up to 23 and above, if you've got the capability. The next contest that's actually I need to remind people about is the Alara contest, which is on the 29th and 30th of August. And also on the 28th and 29th, we're participating in a DATV QSO party, which is a global party, because we actually have the Americans and the English, from UK, involved on the Saturday morning, so it's their Friday night. But if you haven't been involved in a QSO party, we do the rounds of a whole lot of ATV stations around Australia, and then on the Saturday morning we actually then get the other countries involved. So that's all organised by Peter Cousins, VK3BFG. So a good lockdown activity for Victoria, for our Victorian stations, which we're thinking about. So that's happening on the 29th and the 28th and the 29th. So Friday the 28th night and Saturday the 29th. So that's happening. And for our RF viewers, we're actually we'll head to a couple of videos that we've got. The very first one's actually a very interesting one about the story of Hewlett-Packard. The two guys that started Hewlett-Packard, absolutely fascinating. Only a short little video, but really, really good. And I thought about the maritime theme, and the second video is actually about a maritime net that was run out of the US, and there is a little bit of a thing about what's a maritime net all about. So I threw that in, and I think that's probably where we'll get to by the time we have to disappear. So anyway, that's our show for tonight. Please have a look at these and ask Cedric any questions, and also the Go Kit, the Navigator's Go Kit. And there's some things in there that I'm going to have to ask about what they actually are, because I wouldn't have a clue. But I'm sure it'll all become clear in the fullness of time. So thank you very much, Cedric.
No problem, Justin. Enjoyed it.
That's good. That's good.
Thank you.
Good stuff.
All I need now is a copy of the frequencies for the band dance next weekend.
Yeah, was that in the broadcast?
Yes.
Was it? Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
you don't. Yeah, so just 1296, 150 and
I'll be getting up at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh yeah,
Sweet. You've got to, mate. You've got to get
I don't know. They just let you do it.
I did.